Welcome back to the Heart Podcast. Today's episode, we'll be having a conversation with Matty Burke about his podcast and life in general and the things that he's seen in his curiosity about mental health.
Here we are.
It's amazing technology lets us do this stuff.
No, it is crazy.
Yeah.
Just on the other side of the continent, just chatting away.
Yeah, I
right
know.
now.
You're four time zones away and I don't know how many thousands of miles. And
Yeah.
just hey, this works. How does this work? This is crazy. I like it. So in some ways we're parallel because there's a part of behavior and mental health that we're both working with. Can you give the 2-minute introduction or 3-minute introduction or however long you want to take introduction about yourself and kind of how you got into this space?
Sure. So my name is Matty Burke. I have a podcast called Matty's Mental Health Podcast. I've been doing that for the last 3 years. And basically what I do is I have people on who want to share their story with mental health.
Yep.
And I've done 80 episodes in the last 3
Wow.
years. And it was actually really surprising how many people reached out to want to come on. And I've had people that have personal experience with mental health and also, mental health professionals come on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been cool. Learned a lot from that. And I'm also a behavior change coach. So I specialize in behavior change. Specifically, I help people lose weight. So I help people change their behaviors around health and fitness. And I've been doing that the last year and a half. I was a personal trainer before that. And then I got more into the psychology side of things, behavior change,
Nice.
which I find helps people a lot more.
Right.
So I've been really enjoying that. But that's kind of in a nutshell what I do, 2 things that I do.
Cool. What got you started down the whole mental health podcast road?
Right.
People don't normally just one day wake up and come to a podcast on mental health.
Yeah. So 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago, the girl I was dating at the time committed suicide.
Oof. Ouch. I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. Yeah. So she committed suicide, and I had my own process of that, dealing with grief and going through that whole thing. But after it happened, immediately after it happened, almost, I was like, I want to do something with this. I don't want to just have this pain and let it not go towards something.
Right.
But I didn't know what that was. It was kind of a thought in the back of my mind. Of course, you have to deal with that stuff.
Right.
And but later on, a few years later, I got into podcasts. I really got into podcasts, listened to them all the time. And I was like, it would be really cool to have a podcast where I just bring people on and let them share their story with mental health. Because what I found, even before I met her and that happened in my young life, before that, I just even experienced some depression myself through teens and seeing it in other people. I seen so much that people just felt like they were alone and they were the only ones going through it.
Right.
And then, now I've done 80 and everyone said that they feel like they were the only ones at the time. Why do I feel like this? No one else feels like this. I'm the only one that feels like this. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to create a place where people could just come on, share their story. And then hopefully if it helped one person, that one person listened to it, oh, I guess I'm not the only one that feels like this, or has these thoughts, or whatever the case may be. So that's why I started the podcast.
It's an excellent reason. Yeah, totally makes sense. What kind of interesting ahas have you heard from people aside from this common thread of they're alone, which I want to loop back to because I'm really curious about that.
Okay. Yeah. It's common ahas, I think.
Or even uncommon ones, ones that one person said something and you were like, oh, light bulb moment.
I think there's a lot of them. I think when you talk to anybody like this, there's always I always get a lot out of it. It's like hearing someone's life story almost, you just feel you just come out of it educated. You're like, wow, I learned a lot just from, and that's the reason why I actually still love doing it. But I'm trying to think of one that really stands out. I think one thing, and this is kind of maybe more macro than micro, is there's always a point where, and I see this now with clients, there's always a point where they have like let's say like they get sick or whatever, they start getting symptoms, like things are going bad. And then they may go get help, but they don't really get help. And then they're kind of in the middle. But there's always a point and where they decide that they're going to take getting better serious.
Mm.
And I've seen that over and over. And then they start like doing the things for themselves. They start taking therapy more serious. They start like going for walks every day, for example. That's been a big thing that's a very common story that I've seen over and over, was people start to take it serious. It's like something clicks.
Do those, that's interesting. Do you, when you hear those kinds of stories and you hear about those kind of click moments, is there any commonality in across the board in those? Is it like, my relationship sucked, or, my partner left me, or I got fired, or what, like,
Yeah, unfortunately there is. I think it's like a human trait. We got to hit rock bottom before we start taking
yeah,
shit serious.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's usually something like that, right? Like, maybe it's like a manic episode, for example, and like the fourth one, and like things got really bad that time. And then, you're in the hospital again, and then it's like, okay, now I gotta take it serious. Or, a relationship started to fall apart, or, you know, even like maybe a relationship with a parent where a parent is like, you know, if you don't make some changes, like, I don't know if I can be around you.
right.
It's like the reality check in some way, some form or another.
It's interesting that rock bottom thing is a really interesting metaphor, because, yeah, it totally makes sense that each person would have that be different.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. When people are hitting that place, you mentioned they take therapy seriously, or they're like, what are the kinds of things that people commonly do to get out of rock bottom? Are there any patterns at all, I guess, is really the question.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say the patterns are um, like medication, if that's something that they're prescribed, and that's something that's, I don't know, it's not for everyone, but it is.
Hmm.
Some people like get on the proper medication, and then like diet, like just consistency with diet, even if it's not like perfect. And then nutrition,
Yep.
hydration rather. So hydration is a big one. And
Oh,
then,
really?
yeah,
Huh. I would not have put. I guess I just take for granted that I drink a lot of liquids, and I don't think about um, hydration or dehydration as being a contributor to mental health problems. Interesting. Okay.
yeah, it is interesting. A lot of people said that. And I think
Yeah.
it's the whole thing of like, your body doesn't function properly when you're dehydrated, but it's also like a mood thing. I think like if you're hungry or thirsty, it's gonna like, let's say that your baseline is here, like, it's gonna be like everything's gonna be heightened. So if you're anxious and you're also hungry and you're also thirsty, it's
Right.
gonna like
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yep. Yep. Yeah.
heighten everything up.
Hangry. Yeah. Yeah.
Big time hangry.
Yeah.
Been there myself
Yeah.
many times. Almost
No,
daily.
it's totally. It's totally true. It's yeah, I've definitely been there. Where I've been. My mood changes dramatically because I haven't had food in too many hours. I have no idea how people do long term fasting.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm like,
Did you ever give it a try or anything?
what's that?
Did you ever take a swing at it?
Um, I've done. Well, I've definitely done 12 hours. That's no big deal. That's not a big deal, because do that overnight, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I've I've probably done 18 hours. Yeah, probably done 18. But I notice that when I start running in calorie deficit, seriously, like in the course of a day, my emotions definitely start to go downhill.
Mm,
Yeah, unless I'm
yeah.
doing something, if I'm in a place of emotional struggle, doing something, then for whatever reason, the lack of food has an impact on my emotional well-being,
Right.
lack of nutrition. I tend to drink a lot of liquid throughout the day, so I don't think dehydration's a problem as much as my caloric intake is down. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I'd have to be really like organized around that to if I was going to go, 24 hours or longer.
I got sick like in my early 20s. I had to do a lot of fasting. I had a stomach problem. I did a few 48 hours, and those were pretty long.
Wow.
The end of that one, like I did 24 good amount of times, but then when you go to like 48, you start like I'd eat like I start eating grass. You know what I mean? I'd start eating anything.
Yeah, I don't know how people, how they do that. I'm sure there's, it's like anything else. Everything is a skill, and
Mhm.
as you approach it and figure out how to incrementally get to that place,
Yeah.
um, it's not so hard. But you have to understand it's like if you want to run a marathon,
Yeah.
team in training does a really good job of getting people from, I can walk a mile as their starting point to, oh, I just finished a marathon.
Right.
And it's a bunch of tiny steps. So I can see, if I knew what all the steps were, I could see getting to 48 hours after, doing whatever the increments are to get me comfortable out there. But I definitely would have to be really, really aware of what's going on in my head as part of that process.
For sure. It's an interesting mental state. I find it was like it's almost like a little bit meditative in a way where it's just I don't know. It's a different kind of mental state. It's like very calm. You're also starving.
Right, right, yeah.
But I think the starvation makes you kind of be present in a weird way.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, yeah. Okay, now I'm really curious. I might have to go do this as an experiment.
Yeah.
Do a bunch of research on fasting and figure out, okay, what's the increments and what that would look like. Have you done keto diets?
Yeah, I did in the past
Okay,
for a little bit, but
yeah. Um, I've done that a bit in the past, and I noticed uh, some. I noticed a little more mental clarity. Like
mm,
it was easier for me to stay focused
yeah.
when I was pretty close to zero carbs
Hmm.
or zero fast carbs, I should say. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I felt the same thing. And that's the same kind of thing I think with like the longer fasts. So you're not getting
right,
that like the sugar up and downs.
right,
So
right. Yeah, yeah.
it's
Interesting.
kind of just this baseline.
Yeah, yeah. Um, to the loop back, you made a comment about everybody feels like they're alone in this problem.
Mm.
With all of the different kinds of media that people are talking about mental health right now, why do you think that people feel like they're alone despite there's stuff on the news or social media or something at a minimum every day about it. Um, Schools have stuff about it. I just was walking through my son's high school over the weekend, and they have big posters up about mental health check-ins. Um,
Right.
why do you think people feel alone about it?
That's a good question. I've thought about it a bit. I think well maybe like a two-part there's a two-part thing to that where like well maybe even just first of all I think it's like it's a lonely thing to be going through in the first place. Like if you're depressed, for example, I think like the first tendency is to isolate yourself.
Mm,
And it's like they wouldn't want to hear from me. And like the whole suicide ideation thing is all like they would be better off with me anyway, without me rather.
right, right. Yeah, yeah, yep.
And then anxiety, like social anxiety, that's like, you know, I'm going to avoid that because that's social. So I think that like maybe the feeling of alone is like a lack of connection.
So it's a personal aloneness, not necessarily nobody else in the world is struggling like I am kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's like, first of all, with the feeling. And I think, and I've thought about this a lot because I think it's awesome. Like all the everything that's being promoted, like everything you just said, it's becoming more and more mainstream.
Right.
But I also think people relate a lot to like stories and like
Right.
the reality of the situation.
Right.
Like it's one thing to be like, if you just put something physical, like it's one thing to be like, cancer is bad, we should try to save, or we should try to cure cancer. It's another thing to like have cancer and have the reality of chemo and all that stuff. Like,
Mhm.
I guess it's almost like it's a layer of separation that most people feel. I don't know if this is making any sense, but it's like people don't necessarily connect, especially if they're struggling themselves, to like a mental health poster. But if someone like opens up about their story, if someone speaks to the kids about like, listen, I was depressed, I felt how,
Right. Right.
and then 3 kids might like click and be like, shit, this is how I feel, and they might go
Right.
tell somebody.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's the personal bubble, personal sphere kind of a thing. Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes sense. That
yeah,
definitely, yeah, yeah. It's definitely a very personal kind of thing, and I know from my experience, uh, when I was struggling, recognize I didn't have any data analytic tools available to recognize uh, that I was in depression. Like I just, it wasn't I didn't have a pattern match available for that.
right,
And to go, oh, here's what's going on, and I need to go find help. Um, and I wonder I think like we work with high school students a lot, uh,
right,
and they they are able to say, oh, I'm suffering from depression now
right.
because there's so much awareness in their circles of it. Seems like it's a huge change in that, at least in this part of the world. Um, I would say in the last, well, definitely in the last decade. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's interesting. Yeah, and yet
that
still,
makes,
kids still are they even when they know it, they don't have a good easy path to getting the kind of help they need to get out of that place.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. And there's always, that's the other thing, there's always so much fear about getting help.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I remember when I was in the ninth grade, which was like 15 years ago or something, and maybe English class or something, they were talking about this first time I ever really heard of depression, because never
Right.
really talked about it before that. And English class, they were talking about what depression is. It feels like you're in a deep hole and you just can't get out. And it clicked for me then that I was depressed.
Mm.
I didn't know before that. But I remember at that time, like, and it's just, just feelings I remember was like, I should go get help. I should go talk to a counselor or something. But I didn't, because I was too scared to go talk to them.
Right. Right. Yeah. Now at least around here, there's so much demand for therapists that there's months of waiting.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Our founder's clinical uh, mental health professional, and um, the at one point in time, you had to wait 3 months to get an evaluation for their
Wow.
clinical program. Yeah. And that was like a year ago. That's how long the wait was. She ultimately left that program, and that's part of how we got Heart going, was because she became available full time. But the you know, we hear all the time people saying, "Oh, I'm trying to find a therapist who has time available." And
Wow.
one of yeah one of her colleagues decided to set up a therapy business part time, just to kind of see what it was like. And she had so much demand that she quit the hospital because uh, she just there was more demand than she could do part time. And now she's hiring other people to fill in, also just because the demand's so great.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting, and the from a macro level, the problem just keeps getting worse.
Mm.
Yeah, it's not improving yet. We haven't gone over the top yet of the curve. Yeah, interesting. Where would you like to take, longer term? What's the kind of impact that you want to have?
That's a good question. I've been kind of pondering it for a little bit. I took a little bit of a break for like, a month or two. A while back, I was really busy with business from the podcast, and I thought about what exactly I want to do with it long term. And now I'm getting more towards talking to people like yourself,
Mhm.
um, kind of professionals in this area. It's like I'm more interested in like I talk to a lot of people about their story. I'm more interested in talking to people about what are the solutions. But if I'm thinking like
Yeah.
if I'm thinking like long term about what the impact that I'd like to have, like with my coaching business, with the podcast, with them together, is like trying to broadcast some solutions and like trying to help people kind of on a large scale.
Nice. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how people only know how to do what they know how to do.
Yeah.
And if they don't know, that's like, I have no idea how to do a 48-hour fast,
Yeah.
but I know that there's enough people who've done it out there that I can find the steps to get there, right? To be able to do it. Um, on the flip side, back when I was really struggling, I didn't know that I didn't know what was possible. Like it was a complete blind spot. Like it was a double blind. I had no idea what was out there. Um, and so I didn't even know to go look for it. Um, and I, I hypothesize that is incredibly common,
Yeah.
because the ways that we see people struggle are are very consistent, and um, they're all solvable. It's not like there's it's all solvable. It's just that no one's done a good job yet of bringing that to light and saying, oh, okay, here's the kind of struggles people have. Here's why they have those kinds of struggles. Here's the skills to learn that makes that not a struggle anymore. And here's how to practice and build competency so that that thing becomes easy. And you can look back and go, oh, I remember when this was really hard. I remember when this was impossible. Yeah. Um, yeah. I think we're the first people to do that.
I'm curious, by the way, if you don't mind me asking, like what are the common, like you mentioned, like people struggle in similar ways. What are the biggest like commonalities that you've seen, the biggest patterns?
Um, so at a kind of a macro level, it's self-limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
It's self-limiting beliefs, right? They don't, and I was one of those people. Every human has self-limiting beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Um, Otherwise, I'd be on a billboard in Times Square right now. Uh, you know, but
We all would.
yeah, I'll be there today. You can be there tomorrow. We'll just, we'll schedule it, right? Or we'll rotate. I'll take even days. You can have the odd ones. But it's always some kind of self-limiting beliefs about what's acceptable behavior in a given environment.
Hmm.
And because of confirmation bias, people don't notice outlier data that gives them other possibilities. Like, for most of the time that I've worked here in Silicon Valley, bicycling to work has been one of my primary transportation modes. And when I've talked to people, they've been like, "Wait, how do you bike to work?" I'm like, "Well, I get on my bicycle and I ride to work and I take a shower and I, put on a shirt and away I go." And they're like, "I could never do that. That would be," and I'm like, "Well, why not?" Like, and it's because they don't know that there's a group of people that bike to work pretty regularly, that they miss the data because they're in traffic over there on the freeway. And all they see is all these other people going to work in their cars or on a bus. And their mental model is this is the only acceptable solution, and that the difficulty level of biking to work is too high.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I'm like, biking to work is super easy because I don't have to sit in traffic. Number one, because I hate sitting in traffic.
Yeah.
Number two, it's super calming. And both directions. When I come home at night, I'm not stressed about work. I'm like, I just had an awesome bike ride. That was
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I don't have to do cardio when I go to the gym. I can just like warm up and jump in straight into it. But people don't, when they don't see that kind of thing happening in the world, they don't recognize it as possible. That's one. Um,
That's awesome.
People haven't learned to take initiative because it's uncomfortable. And that's a huge one. I see it all. I mean, for 15 years, I've been kind of had this side thing of helping people with their careers, and the lack of initiative is just across the board the thing that stymies people. Because, and it doesn't matter, like, I've worked with VPs at Tesla and Google, and they've got billion-dollar budgets. Like, they have a ton of responsibility, and they still don't know how to take initiative. And by initiative, I mean stepping into a place that's not their perfect comfort zone and experimenting and learning. Um, they very much know what's in their lane, and everything they do is in their lane, and they don't know how to step out of it. And they expect someone else to tell them what to do. If it's you should go do this to advance your career or to do whatever, they're looking for, and they're looking for someone to spoon feed them rather than to figure it out on their own. And once you can start taking that initiative and exploring more, there's all these doors sitting there that are unlocked, and you can just open any of them, do whatever you want to. It's just that no one says these doors are all unlocked and they're available, and there's not a tiger behind it. You just gotta do it.
Right.
I think that's the most common. And then the kind of the meta one is that everything you ever want to do in the world is a skill. And if you, and that includes emotional resilience. And so if you don't know the skills, then you're not going to do it. You're not going to be able to do it. It's like juggling, right? Juggling is a skill, and you can read books on juggling, but you're not a juggler until you actually start throwing things around.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with everything else you could possibly do. Yeah. Have any of your guests talked about dialectical behavior therapy?
A few definitely have.
Okay. And I'm assuming that a bunch of them have talked about cognitive CBT.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we've taken dialectical, or DBT, and we've made it pragmatic everywhere, not just in a mental health construct, but so as an example, initiative, right? The reason people don't take initiative is they don't have the stress tolerance. and they don't know how to break down something into little pieces of how do I start. And because the distress tolerance is the first thing they bang into, and they say that's too uncomfortable, they don't even
Step up to the plate.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And once you normalize the distress tolerance, all of a sudden, and you start practicing it all the time in non-mental health contexts, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, this is uncomfortable, and what's the tiniest discomfort I can jump into that I can do that's achievable, and I just have to use radical acceptance and breath and maybe one of the other distress tolerance skills to get myself over the hump of doing that the first time. And then, okay, how do I do it again and again and again and again until it's a competency and it's comfortable.
That is fascinating. It's
Thank
a
you.
lot of, yeah, it's a lot of, I mean, I've seen a lot of those patterns, like with my clients, breaking
Yeah.
down to small things, getting over, but just with the, those first two things, um, really comes down to comfort zone.
Right. And that um, getting out of our comfort zone is the only way to progress forward. And I mean, you know this from athletics, right? Like a lot of people, it's uncomfortable to go to the gym or to go for a walk or to stop eating candy. And so you have to be willing to push that boundary to advance and change your experience of the world.
I think there was a quote I like everything you want is on the other side of fear.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting, like looking at it kind of like taking a step back a little bit, like people staying in the comfort zones, blinders on, wanting to be told what to do next.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
it reminds me a little bit of the education system.
I would say that the reason people are doing what they're doing is because the education system has taught them that.
Mm.
Most schools, kids aren't rewarded for being free thinkers
Mm.
or asking a lot of questions or uh, wanting to have something operate in a way that gives them motivation.
Yeah.
And Montessori, do you have Montessori schools?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So Montessori is the biggest school system that I know of that's driven by student curiosity.
Mm.
So when you're curious about something, you're naturally motivated. You want to learn about it, and they interlace the stuff that you need to learn about, like how to read and do math and all that stuff, with your curiosity. And so that makes it a lot more exciting for kids to learn, and it makes it more exciting for adults to learn also.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but the mainstream schools here are haven't done that. They don't have a model for doing that at scale,
Yeah.
or they don't think they have a model for doing it at scale. Let's put it that way. Because I'd
Yeah.
be willing to bet that somebody's probably figured out a way to do it. It's just it's not an imperative for the schools here to make that happen.
Right.
And parents don't know it's even possible.
Right.
So the school system is doing that, and that's a lot of the people that I've worked with, they're coming out of college with amazing degrees, but because they don't have initiative, they can't get anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and they have those self-limiting beliefs, and so they're stuck. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like this place, like, you're in that system, then you're rewarded for being a certain way, which is kind of like just do your work.
Yeah.
Don't be too curious. It's like A equals B, whatever. And then, you finally get out of that, and then the world's much different than that once you get out there.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Um, it's the, it's the pragmatic side of, of, of being successful at life. Yeah. And, and figuring out what it is that older generations took for granted, because older generations tend to have really high distress tolerance because they had to, and they they had a much higher diversity of things they knew how to do because they had to.
Right.
And because of our fuzzy pattern recognition, if you know how to do I don't know, if you know how to replace the radiator in a car and do the coolant plumbing there, doing plumbing in your house isn't that hard. It's not that
Right.
big of a stretch. Um, and so you can feel more confident when you can go, oh, wait a minute, I know how to do the plumbing in my car. This toilet's got a problem. Oh, I can go fix that. Right. But if you don't know how to
Yeah.
do anything in your car, you don't know how to do anything in your house either. Right. Or vice versa. Maybe you come about it the other direction from the house first. But if you don't know how to do any of that stuff, then you're just stuck.
Right. It's interesting with the distress tolerance.
Oh yeah, yeah. We do a ton of work around that. That's because we recognize that, and especially our founder Barbara, that was the clinical stuff that she worked on was it was all about distress tolerance, because all the people that came in, uh, her big aha early on was the skills we're teaching these people work really, really, really well, and if they had these skills, they'd never be here. It's kind of like if you know how to swim, falling off the boat's not a big deal. But if you
Right.
don't know how to swim and you fall off a boat, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And nobody learns to swim when they fall off the boat. Like, Michael Phelps didn't get to become Michael Phelps by falling off of a boat.
Right.
And so with mental health, that's not a model of education that anybody has taken on yet.
I like that a lot.
Cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So I think that's it is what's missing. It's part of what's missing for sure. Just education on how to cope with it, how to deal with it,
Right.
how
Right.
to use
Yeah.
your own tools.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Would you say that would be the root cause?
Lack of education. Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, it goes back to, you can only do what you know how to do. And if your role models don't know how to do it,
Mm.
you have no idea. Like, we use water and swimming as an analogy a lot because people understand it. I grew up around role models that were really comfortable in the water. And so I saw the water as a playground, and learning how to swim is fun. And then snorkeling and then diving and surfing and what, God, water skiing and windsurfing and now whitewater rafting. And, I've played underwater hockey. Anything that's
Underwater?
underwater hockey. Yeah. It's like getting your ass kicked on the bottom of the swimming pool. Yeah, it's crazy.
Well,
Yeah. It is easily the most challenging sport I've ever done.
you have like weights on your feet, or what do you?
Oh, you wear fins and a mask and a snorkel, and you're holding your breath on the bottom of the pool, and it's 6 feet deep, and there's a puck that you're driving along the bottom of the pool with a little hockey stick, and everybody else is trying to get it away from you.
That's wild.
And it is pretty common for people uh, at the national level to lose teeth because you're coming up behind somebody and you kicked in the face.
Oh,
And
man.
and so yeah, it's just
I gotta check this out on YouTube.
yeah, it's
There's
crazy.
nationals for this.
There's nationals for this, yeah. But it's like if you want a really amazing anaerobic workout,
Mm.
it's the best.
Oh yeah, I imagine.
Because when you're like really you're trying to get the puck down and you're
Yeah.
on the bottom holding your breath, you're kicking like crazy,
Yeah.
and really you've got to get to a pretty deep level of oxygen starvation
Yeah.
before you finally stop and go up.
Hmm.
And then you're like, oh my god, this air tastes so good,
Yeah.
but you need to get back
Yeah.
down to get back into it again to help your team. So it's wild.
Yeah, that's crazy. Man.
Now you know something. You know a new sport to go experiment with. Yeah.
Go torture myself with.
Yeah. But it's, if you like I didn't know how to do a bunch of stuff.
Mm.
And also the things that I knew how to do, I didn't know how to talk about or how to abstract into other contexts. And I didn't understand the value of them.
Right.
And so that's scary. You know? And when like I've been teaching my kids these skills as fast as I can, as I've been learning them, and I've been contextualizing them for them. And so uh, when my younger son went back to school, he had social anxiety. And so I gave him a recipe to use on campus, and a week later his problem was he had too many friends. And he said, I don't know what to do. I don't know how do I prioritize my time? And I said, okay, now you have a new kind of problem. Let's go figure that out. But it's all a skills-based approach, and the starting point is being able to have a little bit of stress tolerance, and then do an activity. In this case, it was just going over and saying hi and talking to strangers. And once he had the recipe, he was able to do it. So yeah, back to your point, it's the root problem is education. Yeah, if nobody knows how to swim, almost everybody drowns, or they just don't go in the water. Yeah, yeah.
I really like that. Even at like the kid level, getting them like to go outside their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of thing that's like you got like a generation of kids doing that.
Right.
Then things are a little different when they get older.
Right. And it's easier, I think, it's easier to start going outside your comfort zone as a kid because, and the earlier the better, because you haven't been indoctrinated by the culture to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And like, we've got a friend of ours who grew up, there's a little island in the South Pacific called Saipan. It's 100 miles from Guam, which more people know of Guam. And he grew up in a house with no electricity. They didn't have electricity until he was, I think, a senior in high school. They had solar panels and car batteries, and everything was 12 volt. Everything that was electric, they cooked on wood-burning stoves. And this, by the way, is a U.S. trust territory. So he's a U.S. citizen, and most of high school he got really bad grades because he was fishing at night to feed his family and to take fish to the fish market to sell. Pretty crappy childhood. Alcoholism there is really high, and his dad was one of those people. But also, he has an insanely high work ethic. And so he got into college here and realized immediately that being in college and getting good grades was way, way, way easier than anything he'd ever done before. And so he went from being a pretty shitty high school student to being a 4.0 GPA college student. And he also started doing outreach to college grad research projects, and started doing research projects, helping people with their research projects, and got sent all over the world to go help with research. And when he finished his undergrad and he was ready to be a grad student, because of his work ethic, when he applied to Berkeley to be a researcher, he got accepted in 5 minutes because they already knew about the stuff he'd been doing. And even though he'd had a shitty childhood, because of his work ethic, he had an amazing college time and completely transformed his life. Right. So there's, as you learn things, as you see things, as you recognize things, you can go radically different directions. He also
Right.
uses DBT.
Right.
We met him pretty early in us working on this, and Barbara taught him some DBT skills, and then hooked him up with a therapist, and all the distress tolerance has been huge.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that like on another level as well, it's like going back to like the limiting beliefs thing. Like if people like
Oh
are in
yeah,
a situation where they're in high school and they don't have a good high school experience, like he could have easily just took a left turn and stayed in that island, became an
yeah,
alcoholic or something. And
yeah.
I don't know if that's but it's like it's just a story. It's more of a story than the individual. It's like that can happen. It's like people
Sure.
do that. Like they the limiting belief of like I wasn't a good student in high school. Like I won't
Yep.
be a good student in college. And then
Right.
all of a sudden,
Yeah,
or you can take this way. It's like it clicks. It's like I just got to work hard. I can do that.
yeah, yeah. And for him, it's not even that hard work.
Mm,
That's what's amazing about it is he doesn't see it as hard work. Which is, and it's because he's comparing to something else he's done. And in his mind, that was hard work, and this is not. Yeah. And so he has a skill stack that allows him to see something as not hard work, and
right.
that's the beauty of it. Yeah,
Right. That's awesome, man.
yeah.
It's
It all goes
awesome what you
back.
guys are doing.
Yeah, it all goes back to skills. Yeah, it's all. Once you can wrap your head around that, and you can start to, once you learn all the skills, then and you start to learn recipes, which is how do you put together these. You've got this problem, right? How do I solve this kind of problem? Like a few years ago, I needed to get over my fear of public speaking.
Right.
And so I built myself a recipe, and it took me 4 speaking engagements in 2 months to get over my fear. And now I think it's super fun. And
Right.
it's I had to know this, I had to understand the skills and then build myself a recipe. Um, and now I'm like, oh, okay, I need to do more public speaking. Yeah.
So can I ask, like, what would be the recipe, like, just for example, like that in particular? Would it be like meditation, um, building up to it, or what would it be?
No, no. Um, so meditation is a skill,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of like approaching the world with a framing hammer. You have one tool, and it's good for one particular kind of thing, but there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of places where it's irrelevant.
Right.
Like you can't meditate your way to being a good speaker. It just doesn't
No.
work, right? So, first thing is to break down what it is about speaking that you have to be able to do to get up there and to be comfortable. And for me, and different people can be different, but for me, it was one, I had to know the material.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had to actually know the material enough to be able to speak about it, right? And so I made sure that when I was doing my talks, the stuff I was talking about I knew really well, so that even if my presentation and my notes all blew away and I lost my computer, I could do the whole talk and it would be no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
The second part was I I needed to be comfortable that, as part of that I wouldn't forget what the heck I was the story was about, right? The presentation. And so I had to practice it. And so I practiced it 30 or 40 times, and I recorded them so that I could go back and check myself, right? So the repetition is really helpful for me. Um, the third thing for me was I really wanted to make sure that I knew people in the crowd, because for me, it's scary to talk to a sea of strangers, or it was scary to talk to a room full of strangers. But what I noticed was that during my years in the technology world, I could give presentations to my software teams pretty easily because I knew everybody, right? And even when other people from the company came to the meeting, because I knew my software team really well, that was my safety net. And so with doing talks, what I did to get over that problem was I went there early. I helped the organizers set up, and then I greeted as many people as I could as when they came in the door, and got to know who they were and got to learn a little bit about them. And the first 3 people through the door that were easy because they were ahead of schedule. And then as more people were coming in, obviously I couldn't talk to everybody, but that way I had some familiar faces in the crowd, and I felt like I had a group of friends that were in the crowd. And the last thing is that I scheduled my talks for different lengths, starting with really short and moving up to much longer. And so my first talk was only 5 minutes. And then the next one was a panel that I was on. It was 15 minutes. And then I did another panel that was scheduled for half an hour, but it turned into an hour and a half. And then I did a solo that also turned into an hour and a half. Yeah. But the breaking it down into what are the challenges, right? Oh, also every time I got up before I got up to speak, I did about 5 minutes of slow exhale breath.
Mm.
And slow exhale is a technique that slows your heart rate, and it changes your neurochemistry. And
Right.
so you're just physiologically more relaxed when you get up on stage.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's fascinating. So breaking down what the actual fear is for you as the individual, and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
what can you actually do about those individual things, like
yeah.
on a practical level.
Right. It's super pragmatic.
Mm.
When my kid had social anxiety, and was, what he wanted really was, what's an opening line to say to somebody who I don't know.
Yeah.
And I always had him do the slow exhale breath for however long he could before he went up, and I said, just go up and say, hi, my name is Blake, I'm new here. What's your name and what grade are you in? And as simple as that sounds, because he wasn't hearing other people around him do that, he didn't have that as something that was role modeled. And he didn't have enough background knowledge and data in his head to be able to build that from scratch.
Right.
It's kind of like building with Lego.
Mm.
When you very first get a Lego and they're like, oh, here's whatever 20 pieces you can make a tree, right? You've got a pattern in your head for how Legos work, and then you get another, you do more things, and you get other patterns, and all of a sudden one day you're like, wait a minute, now that I know this, I could actually build a car. I've never seen a Lego car before, but now I've got enough pattern in my head that's all varied that I can abstract how to go do that. It's kind of like cooking also, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you,
You mentioned recipe.
yeah, you can make up a recipe out of the ingredients in your house on the fly after you've been cooking it. Like, my girlfriend does this all the time. She'll be like, oh, what should I make tonight? I'm like, I don't know. And she'll look around and go, well, we've got this and this. Okay, I know what to do. I'm going to put this together. And I'm like, that's amazing. You know? And it's because when she started cooking as a kid, she had recipes. And her mom or her aunt or her grandmother said, here, here's how to make it, here's how to put it together. And she got to a certain point where she could abstract designing her own recipes from scratch. Yeah.
It's interesting because it's a lot of the work I do with my clients in a slightly different way, but it's like opposed to like, the personal training days where it's like, this is what we're doing. It's more
Right.
like and just going through a workout together. But now as a coach, it's like, what's one change you can make to your diet this week? And I have like a framework and outline of things that we go throughout the program. But what's one change you can make to your diet this week that would actually work for you? And then they'll decide whatever it is. It's like, what do you want to do for exercise this week? And they'll pick that. So it's like building the and then that builds up over time. And then they're at a place where it's like not even recognizable from where they were at the start, but all it was just breaking it down pragmatically, small steps over time.
Right.
Instead of trying to like jump in and be like, okay, this week you're a new person. This week you're gonna
Yeah,
start running marathons, bike to work. You're going on keto, doing 48-hour fasts. You're doing everything.
Right. Wow. Right. Yeah. That would explode people's heads, when you do that. That's the and once you can break it down pragmatically and help people understand the structure of the framework and how it ties into everything, then I think for me the big thing was I suddenly had hope that once I could understand the problem, I could break it down and solve it.
Yeah.
That's
the big thing. People don't understand the problem. I've talked to like a lot of people. It's like, in that process of like seeking help, where like there's a 3-month wait or whatever, but it's like they don't even know what the problem is, so they don't even know where to seek help or what to do next.
Right.
Like there's a lot of confusion sometimes of like, I don't even know what the hell's going on with me, right? And then if you think about like whatever the problem is, it could be something like bipolar, where it's like there's confusion, delusion is all part of that.
Right. And we have this. There's some interesting things happening in mental health right now, where kind of on the leading edge research, and a lot of it is like root cause analysis. And if using the water as an analogy, if you start off with role models that see the water as fun, and you start playing in the water, and then you get comfortable swimming, and then you start diving or surfing or whatever, you've got a global playground of stuff you could do in the water. It's a huge fun zone versus somebody who doesn't learn how to swim ever, and they're 35 years old, and every time they go someplace that's got water around, it's scary because they don't know how to have that become a playground. And that's a very life experience narrowing kind of a thing, and it makes you feel powerless. And powerless is the starting down the slide to depression or anxiety. And so when you know that you can do stuff, that stuff's doable and you can learn how to do it, you just got to figure out who knows the recipe, then you don't get depressed. You just go, oh, wait a minute, what's the recipe? What do I need to practice to get there? When I started whitewater rafting 6 years ago, the water was easy for me. I just didn't know how to navigate the boat, right? Like, how do I look at the water to get the boat to go where we need it to go? I had no clue. And so I was just in the middle of the boat paddling whenever they told me how to paddle, right? Because I had no idea. But then, because I wasn't afraid of the water, it allowed me to start to think and engage and analyze and, oh, why are we going here? And why are we going there? And why is the guy doing this? And then all of a sudden I was the guy up in the nose who in tandem works with the guide to get the boat to where you want it to go. And then I started doing 2-person rafts where you got to work a lot more in sync to get the boat where you want it. And I started guiding this last trip that we did, because now I can see it and I'm like, oh, I want to put the boat there and I know how to.
Right.
And that's possible because I've got the right foundation starting point to do it, and I didn't have the skill of guiding the boat on day one, but I knew that it was a skill that I could learn and I could break down, and I could ask people like, oh, how come you want to put the boat there? Or how come we all got dumped out over there? Like what happened that had us eat it there? Oh, that's now I get the hydrodynamics of what's going on with the side of the boat and the water and everything else. Okay, that makes more sense. It's like that with everything. It's like that with interviewing at companies. It's like that with how do you present to executives. It's like that with parenting your kids, having great relationships, all that stuff. Now you want to know all these skills, don't you?
I find it so interesting on a big picture. If you think about like on a societal level of like comfort zone, and then like the level of distress tolerance, that's all. Comfort zones are higher now, I think, in today's society. They say like life is easier, things are at our fingertips, social media, all that stuff.
Right.
And then so distress is lower. It was higher before.
Right.
So there's all that stuff. And maybe like disconnection and stuff, like we're not as connected as we used to be, like in person. Attention span as well has gone way down. It's like 7 seconds. I think in the 70s it was like 30 minutes. It's crazy. But it's like all these things, and then on top of that, like we just don't have the skill, and then the school system as well.
Right.
Where
Right.
it's like we're all just like, when we want to stay in this comfort zone, we just don't have the skills to, I guess, get out of there, get out of that situation.
Right. Right.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it goes back to it's an education problem. You don't understand the value of getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
If you understand the value of getting out of your comfort zone, then you'll think about ways to get out of your comfort zone. If you want to run a marathon, it's uncomfortable, right? 48-hour fast is uncomfortable. Like you didn't do that for the entertainment value, probably.
No.
Right?
No.
You had a motivation driver. And so figuring out what's the motivation driver, like, have you ever seen the TV show Lucifer?
I haven't watched it, but I know of it.
Okay. The basic premise is the devil comes to earth because he's tired of running hell. And he's really a nice guy. And he always says to people like, what's your desire? And people will tell him these crazy desires. It's completely not what people think that character really wants, right? And when people can figure out what their desire is and like actually say it out loud, then have a set of skills and a roadmap to achieve it, it's awesome. But if you can't speak your desire, number one, or you don't think that there's a way to achieve it that you can learn, then life sucks.
Then I'm stuck in this prison where I'm in this comfort zone, or this job I don't like, or I'm stuck in traffic every day, and I have to do X, Y, and Z. It's like school. It's like, that's how I thought of school. It's like, this fucking sucks. I can't pay it. Sorry to swear. I'm not sort of swearing here.
Yeah,
but
doesn't matter. I don't care.
All right, cool. But like, I have a hard time paying attention. I don't really care about the subject. I'm not interested. I'm not curious. And now I'm stuck. And then people like, you get stuck in that mode.
And then you're resentful too. You resent being trapped in this place that's not good and that you don't like and you don't understand the value of. And yeah.
I think an interesting point with comfort zones is like, if you think about the most exciting time of your life, just ask yourself if you were in a comfort zone at that time.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I had a life coach on my podcast one time. He wrote a book called Let It Go. And I think one of the things he mentioned in that book was about, comfort zones. I forget the way he phrased it, but it was like, if you think about like all the times, the things that we look forward to in life, it's always something new. It's always out of a comfort zone. Like vacations, it's literally just something new. Like reading a book, it's something new. Or, like anything, it's always something new. It's always getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. Exactly. We just don't do enough normalizing that that's really an attractive place to go to. Yeah.
Complacency.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a killer. Yep.
This talk's getting me fired up. I'm gonna go.
Good. Like, oh my God, what? Yeah. Yeah. After this,
Go
I'll be
give a
writing.
speech somewhere. I'm gonna go give a speech in the park. I don't know if anyone's gonna listen, but
Yeah. Well, you can do a live on YouTube or on Instagram,
yeah,
or even on TikTok for that matter.
it's
So
a better place than the park. No one's in the park nowadays, or there might be like 3 people, but more people will be
right.
online.
Yeah, but in the park is better oxytocin for you.
Yeah,
Live people, that's purely enlightened self-interest, neurochemicals. Go do the park.
yeah,
Yeah, and stick your phone up on a tripod, and that way you can get the live happening also.
yeah. 2 birds.
Yeah,
One stone.
exactly. Yeah, cool. This has been awesome, man. That was great. That was a
Yeah.
fun conversation. Thank you.
It was a lot of fun.
Shit.
Thank you for having me on.
How can people get hold of you?
You can find me on all social medias under Matty Burke, Matty Burke Coaching, and you can find me on YouTube and all the listening app platforms for the podcast under Matty's Mental Health Podcast.
Cool. And I will put links to all that in the show notes.
All right. Thank you so much, man.
That's kind of what we need, right? We need to click on the links. Sweet. This has been awesome.